It's good to see that whole tool set they've put together. I know that Mark is in the audience, so he's another expert. Maybe maybe you can just wave your hand if anybody has questions later. He'll be at the booth as well. So he's another experts at Conterra, and he really knows Arc server and FME server as well. And one of the points he makes is that he has a nice slide about the tip of the iceberg. So with the whole Inspire Solution Pack, because they've embedded the intelligence of all of the technical requirements for things like XML services and the Inspire requirements in terms of the standard and the data specifications, you really only need to know your data and then plug it into that system. But just in terms of the last section here, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about what next. Now what? We have this great Inspire infrastructure. It's generating compliant GML, compliant OGC web services. So now what can we do with it? Well, one thing to think about is on your average mobile phone, iPad, how many of them can consume this data? Now, this is a little scary, but a lot of mobile devices use XML. They don't necessarily support Inspire GML. What we're looking at software is how can we support the wider user community to benefit from Inspire. There may be a few agencies, a few government agencies that actually have to create the Inspire services, but there's the whole breadth of society, not just GIS users, people working at various levels of government, people working in utilities, even in schools, that could benefit from all this Inspire data. So how can we reverse that data transformation from the complex Inspire data model to something a lot simpler? So FME does allow you to consume any Inspire data out there in any of the Annex themes. I guess right now in FME 2012 we deliver FME with the Annex 1 themes, so out of the box the Inspire reader is tested with Annex 1. But in theory, any Inspire data can be used. And there's that comes and again, and a bunch of slides here kind of fly through, a bit dizzying, but then I'll exit out to a couple of demos, depending on how much time we have. And one of the terms that I keep mentioning is flattening. So by definition, XML is a highly nested structure. And in order to use it with the average client application, which is more relational or table-based, you have to kind of flatten that structure. Now, we don't always want to do that because we might have a database or service that is the XML structure. So you don't have to flatten it, but in many cases, that's really the easiest approach. So just a few words about XML. How many people here work with XML on a regular basis? Okay. So, and maybe I should just have a quick show. How many people here use GIS? Because I kind of presume that, okay, so it is most of the audience. Because sometimes at conferences when we're talking about GIS, not actually everybody is coming from that perspective. So we're all GIS data structures. In XML, we just have a tag with content in it. So you could call it structured text. Some people might complain, some of my colleagues complain, oh, is XML a bit of a mess? Well, as complex as it might look, it's still a lot better than unstructured text. And I've had people give me unstructured text, and it's a lot of work to try to interpret. So it's both a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because once you can read and write, now are able to extract data with a huge range of. I like this snapshot, which is a good example that summarizes the problem. Here we have structure on the left. It's not Inspire, but it's typical of an XML data structure. And this is a relational structure. And I think Soren had an example of this as well. So we have, not only do we have a name and a location, but we have a and so there's really no way to model that in a relational structure in one field. Fields don't accept lists in the data. Model that as fields. For example, how we have to model it as a subtable. So this is just the range of the readers that we provide in FME. There's about 30-odd readers. So besides reading Inspire, GML, we can also read a whole range of national standards like the GMS, OpenStreetMap. That might be helpful actually in terms of loading your Inspire data. So why don't I just look quickly at that output. I don't know if this makes sense in this audience or in Turkey, but at SAFE sometimes what we call this is eating your own dog food. And the idea is that if you produce output, you should be able to read it. And that might sound rather silly and obvious, but when we first started doing things supporting WFS, we could find 50 different or hundreds of different servers, almost no WFS clients, or one WFS client would only be able to read the service from the guys who made that client. So make sure when you make a service, test that you can actually read it and get meaningful results out of it. So here's the GFS data, and this is right out of the demo and a few exactly the same file. And we want to extract information. All of that complex structure. All I really want is Pacino. Maybe that's where it's from, I don't know. So I just want that place name on a location. That's it. Okay? So how do we minimize that? What I really need to do is extract this record. Hang on a sec. Named place. I don't want to just get the name because that's just going to give me text. I need to get the GML, that whole data structure. So named place. So in order to do that, then I go to right click on View with FME. I don't want city. It was a did earlier this week, so it's not going to help. I'll just put the regular. Actually, I guess we can say. I could use the reader, but I have to specify the application schema. In this case, I shouldn't have to. But I still might need to set the access order. So sometimes that's not obvious from the data, so you have to choose that sometimes. A few tricks that you can do is, this is where we're talking about flatten. The first time I won't flatten, just so you can see what happens. You can see the difference. So I'm just reading the data, I point at the data, that's all I'm doing. Oh, no, I did miss something. I didn't tell it. Did I put it? I guess it just interprets. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, at once. This is Inspire reader, but we could also use this with the XML reader. So there's more than one way of reading it. So right out of the box, FME supports reading it, not flattening. Now what's the problem there? Any of these support structure. The problem is that the name component is a list, and it's not easy to read. Then it's what it's better to do is that you turn on. And it should go through more of the field names. There. See that San Piero in that is. Double click. zoom in. So now we're extracting the location name. Now this might not seem like a big deal, but go to your average WFS viewer and see if they are out of the box can consume Inspire services, because a lot of WFS readers out there, or libraries that read WFS, might only be to handle GM11, or it might only be set up to handle simple schemas. And so when you have complex nested structures, it's not always easy to interpret. First, and okay. Maybe I'll just show you one other quick thing of it off the top here. What I could have done with this, just to show you the flexibility of FME and kill two birds with one stone, I could actually read this with the XML reader. And I could say match on named, tell it to data. I'm not going to get any geometry box. I'm just going to records, but this is just to give you some idea of the flexibility of FME. That I'm actually reading the whole data set, and I do get position information, and I could use a transformer, a coordinate replacer, or no, I guess it's a 2D point adder. I could take that position information and generate point locations from it. So if for some reason the GML reader or the Inspire reader isn't able to read something, you could try using the XML reader. And so what I've done here is I've made a list of 900 records from that XML document by telling FME to create a feature every time I encounter a named place object. So this whole thing, down to the end of the named place tag, becomes a new record in the FME environment. So you can see all those fields that correspond. And when we talk about flat, what we're doing is we take the parent, child, grandchild nested object structure, and we call it, let's say, grandparent.parent.child, and then Pacino. Happened to find the same record out of 9, I guess it's the first one. So that's why I found it there. Okay? This is an example showing some protected sites data from the from Sweden. So it isn't just working on point data. So I mentioned earlier, these are the tools. So just to review, we support the GML reading and writing. So maybe you have, the ArcGIS Inspire provides the web services. Maybe you just need to generate some Inspire now. Well, you can do that directly with FME. Just gone through some reading examples. Maybe all you need to do is have some existing Inspire data and you just need to update. You don't want to regenerate. We also have transformers. We don't really have time, but you can use a tool called XML Updater, and you just want to update, let's say, the authority or the contact information. So you could run that through an update operation. We've already talked a little bit about validation. That previous demo, the geographic names, is validating against the geographic name schema. So now I want to talk a little more about actually consuming. We can read a GML file. What about consuming web services? So we have an Inspire web service. We have, let's say, ArcGIS for Inspire has web services. How can we consume? There may be other Inspire services out there. How can we consume those? And that's the first question. And then the second question, how can we create web services that might be able to leverage the Inspire work for devices that don't understand Inspire? So the average mobile phone, it might take a while for them to be Inspire compliant. It might be a lot easier to get data on a mobile phone let's say that can understand KML, PDF. I have a quick demo I'll show you, which consumes Inspire data, generates PDF data. Nothing fancy, but the point being that, and I'll repeat this at the end, I think the only way we could really say Inspire is successful is when most of the users don't even know they're using it. Because the vast majority of people that in the wider community that are consuming spatial information, they don't have to understand, or they, by definition, they shouldn't have to understand how the technology works. They are just asking questions and getting answers. And it could be on a PDA or a mobile device, could be embedded in a news or web page somewhere. So what the technical description of covered in the Inspire standards and recommendations is called spatial data services or invoice services. This is one case where you can use our product FME server, and you can specify a range of Inspire data sources, do transformations, the reverse transformation, and then generate or stream PDF data or KML data based on the Inspire data. And the underlying philosophy here is that any data that you've defined on the desktop can become an enterprise level service. So you define a data flow like you've seen me here, and so that can handle things like upload and download. And some of the projects that Conterra's worked on, they use FME to upload data and get transformed into an Inspire repository, and it can also support data download. So maybe you need to have an Inspire service to provide what's required by the Inspire directive, but you also want to allow people to download shapefiles or PDFs, so that could be supported. So the whole philosophy here is to take an ETL process that works on the desktop and make it something that's service-oriented, model-driven, and scalable at the enterprise level. In theory, there's no upper end to the processing power. I don't want to spend too much time on FME server. I just wanted to point out that it's there. So let me show you an example quickly. And I'll make sure we end in time for a few questions. So all this does is it reads Inspire WFS. That's the URL. So geographic names data. So we're going to do the reverse. We're going to read the geographic names data that I've published as an Inspire service. And I'm going to do only one very simple copy. You can see this list structure. So this is a fairly complex schema. I'm going to extract the spelling of name text and give it a value of location name. Now, why do I need to do that? The reason is that PDF, like many formats, does not understand lists. So I have to extract the list. And then I'm going to write out the PDF. So that's all there's to it. This is essentially doing the same thing as I'm doing with the viewer, except I'm writing to PDF. So I can go ahead and run that. Just pull in the data off the WFS reader. So a little bit, we'll sit here and catch our breath for a minute. And write out the data, and I have to go find the output here. So that's the timestamp, 1038. So this is nothing fancy. I didn't really style anything. I just wanted to show you that it opens PDF name, Rovigo, and I could have captured language, whatever else, but anyway, the information's there. So it's not just geography, we can extract what we want from that schema. That's what somebody could do if they have, I guess they would need FME, they could use that to extract data as PDF. Well, what happens if somebody doesn't have FME installed and you just want to set up a service? Well, then you could use FME server, and again, of course, the end user doesn't need FME server, just whoever's setting up the service would. And actually, let me preface this. Once we've defined this transformation, to make it a service, I just go publish to server. And I go through here, and I just say, publish it, call it Inspire WFS to PDF, publish it to the demo repository. Now, anybody who has login ID, login privileges to the demos on my server can consume PDF, and I could open it up so that there's no login required. So now if I go to my server, and I go to, let's say, my demos here, data streaming, demos. I have here one I just recently published called Geographic Names Demo. That's actually the WFS, so we want the WFS, that's right. So in this case, I don't have any parameters. Now I might want to have some parameters to choose which country I'm getting data for. So you have a form for that. I hit run. All I want to demo is the idea that you can get data that's consumable by anyone. So this is just anybody consuming Inspire data. I go keep, and then I go open, and there. Now, your grandmother, if she has something that reads PDF, or maybe on an iPad, she can now consume the Inspire data that you've created. And you know, it's not necessarily that this is that technically complicated. It's just that we have to think about the complete loop. If we're going to promote data harmonization, we need to provide tools that allow people to consume it. And I know this is not a very impressive demo visual, but if you think about it, this is just one workspace with one data source. You could have multiple Inspire WFS services. You could have WMS, and then layer it all together, and then you would have let's say a more presentable PDF, cartographic PDF, all based on Inspire services, but consumable by basically anyone. Okay, so I better wrap up. So let me just quickly summarize. FME has a range of tools for Inspire. Translation, data transformation, schema mapping, and then we have a range of partners that, like Conterra, that provide solutions, and Inspire Solution Pack is a very good example of that supports Inspire Server, ArcGIS for Inspire. And like I said earlier, we have all these tools for data harmonization and integration, but ultimately our success is judged on can people consume our Inspire services, and ultimately I think we'll be successful if majority of the users don't even know they're using Inspire. So do we have any questions before we close?